Okay, great. All right, so welcome back, 315 people. Now we've talked about your problem domain, and now let's get involved with the first step of corporate strategy. Now, corporate strategy is kind of what people focus on in the MBA level, and I just don't find it to be very hard. What is hard is learning enough about human psychology so that you can actually make good assumptions or good surmise as to what might work, and decomposing a problem into very basic human motivations. And so if you're wise enough in that regard, what should keep you from making viable software? Like I don't think you need to wait until you're finished with the MBA. You know, um, and putting that aside, the first step we want to make is in doing a SWOT analysis, a strength, weakness, opportunities, threat, which is a very, very well-known sort of MBA trick. And there's nothing really tough about it. So what I've done here is I'm on Google Drive, and you all probably have access to Google Drive once you make your Google account. And then what you do is you connect more apps. And what I like, and this will be an open-ended recommendation to use Lucidchart for education. And I have just gone ahead and connect that. And you'll find that in order to make that work, and here I've done that, you all will figure this out quite quickly, that the first thing you're going to do is you're going to make a SWOT chart, and they're going to pester you for a paid account. And naturally, we don't want you to make a paid account quite yet. We want you to pay Lucidchart, but you're actually within a university, so you have rights to get a free student version, right? So let's say you make a new document and you go into business analysis, and you make your, see, isn't that cool? There's all sorts of software and database, and here's UML, what you're going to use, a Venn diagram. There's all sorts of wireframing. I mean, there's all sorts of cool things that this is like the systems analyst tool kit. Mind map, there's so many networks. Oh Lord, there's AWS web application. Like you can make all these cool diagrams here. There's just so much going on. Org chart, oh no, you're probably like, oh, I should have known about this. I really forgot to tell you. But if you just go into biz analysis and you go to SWOT, mine is going to open up without any problem because I've gone ahead and registered with my account. And so I'm trying to think, where's my account through here? You guys will just simply make the right choices to say, okay, here's my cpp.edu account, and go ahead and send an invite there, and you'll have your free version up and running in no time. If you don't do this, it'll probably give you a pro account, which is no longer for free. So anyhow, so the SWOT, I'm going to just kind of scroll up through this real quick. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threat. There's some of them are internal. So this is what's happening. Your strengths and weaknesses are stuff that's happening inside of your company. And then they're external, which are the things that are happening out there in the problem domain. So in many ways, you guys have already completed the OT piece of such a design. Now, some of these are negative. So your weaknesses and your threats, those are things that are working against you. And then there are positive, which are your strengths, which is what you're good at, and your opportunities. And this is how, this is about NBA level IQ stuff. Does that make sense? Now, frankly, if you're smart enough to program stuff, this should be pretty darn obvious. But let me just say this. If you slow it down enough to actually do the MBA discipline analysis, it will benefit you as a technologist vastly. We can't just rush into the battle. Just because you have an idea doesn't mean that that fortune is favoring you. Fortune favors the bold, maybe. Fortune certainly does not favor the stupid nor mediocre. So let's maximize this as big as we can. And so let's go into this. So firstly, let's koosh this idea. And let's make a text box here. let's make this text box kind of reach down a bit. And let's say that the idea is really a channel of channels. It's not Hulu, it's not YouTube, it's Kickstarter for drama, it's Pandora for independent media. My apologies if there's the need for a DMCA takedown immediately after this video, but so be it. We must supply market demographic data to the media producer, along with rich audience awareness tools. And otherwise provide a streaming 1080p experience, mobile or otherwise. And we're always asking the question, or our goal is to locate and rally your audience. So my funny joke was, people in California, they're not aware that Mormons in Utah have their own film industry. There is like a Mormon film industry. And that's because their brand of Christianity is separate from, Baptist Christians, and it's separate from Catholics, and it's separate from other, prolific Christian cultures. But you probably wouldn't be aware that they're making movies about missionaries and other stuff within their experience, because the movies never exit Utah. Now, I smiled because, that's a big piece of my life. But what I admire is they said, well, look, we have our own little culture, and, we'll make our own little movies. What's cool about that is that they're never big budget. They're just a bunch of people talking. There's no costumes, for example, maybe, but, there's never a lot of CG. It's just dialogue and people talking. It's just acting. My thoughts is there's no demographic on Earth that would not somehow value a show that is produced by them for them, right? It's that FUBU idea. It's like for us, by us. Does that make sense? And, we're kind of in a climate where people should be doing that on YouTube, but they're not, because it's hard to monetize YouTube content. And this is partly the analysis that you guys have done, where you all should rally your audience for your production, but then enable a payment interface to monetize content. So frankly, getting people to press the buy button is kind of an age-old challenge. So we have to kind of stimulate that. So why don't we just say that is our idea, right? We can just say that that's what we're going for here. And let's kind of frame this against the left. And this can kind of become a piece of our diagram. So why don't we talk about the opportunity? Where in bullet one, let's talk about demographic demand. Let me place a bullet or two up here. Is widespread. Lack of corporate, or Hollywood is more focused on big market products. So for example, Empire, great show, reaches millions. That's what they want. They don't want a good show that reaches 10,000. That you can't make money on that. So you can monetize a small project for a small company. I don't want to say easily, but viably. Now, let me give you an example. Where I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan is, I believe is Dearborn, where there are literally mosques, like big mosques in the middle of cornfields. And you're driving down the highway, and then suddenly there is a mosque in the middle of cornfields. And it's one of the biggest Arab-speaking groups of Americans in America. It's really quite something. And so places like Hamtramck, in prior generations, the Polish, the Eastern Europeans were big immigrant groups. Now, folks from Syria, from Qatar, from Saudi Arabia, from Iraq, all throughout the Arab-speaking world they are the majority population there. And so, for example, the calls to prayer are a part of the daily experience of Hamtramck. It's really, so I kind of want to get back there, but my thoughts is like, probably that group, if you think about that group as a distinct group with their own jokes, their own narratives, their own lore, their own storytelling, their own sense of humor. Like, if they just gather 5 or 10 people, who are like drama grads, from university of wherever, they could make stories that they could just publish themselves and then consume within their own community, for whatever, $2 an episode, $1 an episode, 50 cents an episode, $10 an episode, whatever. And let's say you have 10,000 people who are in that audience and they're paying $2 an episode, and you make it twice a year. That's not all the money in the world, but that could be enough to float a very small company. Where let's say you had 10,000 people, $2 an episode, you got 13 episodes. Well, that begins to become money. That's fundamentally strong. And that kind of commerce interface wouldn't exist over YouTube. So I'm interested in that. I want people to follow up on that. So the opportunity is demographic targeting and that for us, by us idea. Where everybody wants to be, to connect to one's own micro demo graphic. Everybody belongs to a micro demographic. Nobody is in a particular majority. Everybody has something specific about them that deserves to have its own drama. So let's, and I'm not being politically correct at all. I'm just saying that would be an opportunity, and there are producers who want to fill that need. And especially, what if you're saying, well, look, let's say the drama takes place in Hamtramck, and the players actually speak Arabic throughout the whole thing. Well, let's just say this. If you could make 13 episodes, you'd probably find millions of people who want to see that. You would comfortably find a very mass audience, across the world. Just because you focused on a demographic. And also, you could find plenty of people who who weren't even part of that culture, who would find that interesting. For example, what's a show? There's Empire. There's plenty of folks who are not in the African American hip hop audience who watch it, who are consumers of it. Hip hop itself, half of the people who buy hip hop albums are, white Anglo Americans. Does that make sense? That's half the audience, So a good product has a massive uptake across many demographics. But by having demographic specificity, you ground the drama in something real, tangible. So we're interested in that. So we've said it a couple times. So your strengths, you're empowering. You empower. I hate that word empower, but that's the word we have. You empower micro producers, right? You provide a marketplace, and I hope I'm not yelling into the microphone, but empower micro producers. You are creating a marketplace with percentage transaction fees, right? It's valuable. You will make money if you make a marketplace where you don't produce the drama. You just enable its distribution. And you fill the gaps in the existing studio to theater system, and you open up space for many new producers. and you potentially craft a space for new forms of dramatic art. So there's audience participation and a low time between production and distribution. Something that we like to call the West Wing style of script to screen, where it was written this morning, and now it's 9 p.m., and that thing was written this morning based on the headlines of yesterday. And therefore, a West Wing is relevant because of it's going to market quickly. And you don't run into the Mad Men problem where you're waiting 8 months from produced product to screen, where Mad Men ran into problems as they got more popular. All right, so the weaknesses, I don't know what the weaknesses are. Probably it's going to be, I don't know what the weaknesses are. Let's try to get more work done on the weaknesses here. And maybe by being on YouTube, we may actually have people like comment. You guys might actually comment, be like, here's something you forgot, Mr. Mund, or that might be. I don't know if the comments will get to me per se, but GitHub they certainly will. And let's talk about threats. Let's just say that there are many threats out there. There's simply, it's called YouTube, Netflix. Once something gets big, it could simply move on to greener pastures. You could lose your cash cows almost instantly, if not contracted correctly. You may say if you push it into our channel, then it needs to stay on the channel. You have to write that contract. Also, you may end up, you may have storage fees, and why don't we just move this up top here? You need to kind of know this. You also have a streaming infrastructure. You have a technical barriers to solve. It could be solved. For example, AWS and Elastic transcoding, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll tell you what, you guys have the idea. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get away from this, and I'm going to let you work with your groups a little bit for about 15 minutes or so, and craft your own original SWOT, right? Because we're going to do this again. We're going to go through the corporate strategic piece. Then we'll have another paper that's due in about a month. That's just about corporate strategy before we craft. So you'll probably have another 25-page paper. But let's say this: if you're kind of knocking out little snippets of it every couple days, it's not going to be a big deal. It's going to be very fluid, and it's not going to be a big deal at all. So maybe the innovation you introduce is you say, well, every day that we do a diagram, we're just going to take it home and we're going to summarize it, what we learned. For example, this is something that we really learned. We hadn't thought about this, right? That's out there. That's a shark in the water. It's a threat to us. So here's what I do. Once I finish, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to download that as a PNG with a transparent, or and then we'll crop to the content and print quality, and I'll press download, and that will engender the file and do the download. So okay, great. Go ahead, work with your groups a bit, and we'll catch you on the flip-flop.